How do you say "Are you ready" in German?
I wasn't expecting a test today. Wait, hold on.
By the way, this is where the video is starting. The video is opening with me saying, "How do you say "Are you ready" in German?" And if it doesn't open that way, I'm flying to Germany and I'm burning your apartment down. And I'm aware that other people live in the building, and that's a responsibility you have. Continue.
Oh, right. It's on me. Okay, well then I'll do my best. Are you ready?
Uh-huh.
Here we go.
You Google Translator piece of shit.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Kardashev channel. My name's Nico, and this is Mark. And today we're going to talk about Alinea.
We are. Both the language
Bist du bereit?
Bist du bereit?
Bist du bereit?
Nah, I don't like it. Too hard for me
Are
to
you
say.
ready? Bist du bereit? I say it to Jenny all the time. I'm like, you ready to go shopping? But I'm like, bist du bereit für Aufkaufen?
I heard the two of you yesterday when we were talking. She was speaking to you in like straight German for like over a minute. I mean, you've been there almost a year, so I feel like that's a reasonable thing for you to have gotten a lot better with German.
I'll have been here one whole year in a week from today. The 25th of June. Crazy.
For some reason, I thought it was July, but you would remember better than I would because it was your life change, not mine. So
yeah, that's a good point. Thank you, though, for not remembering when I left your proximity. Forever.
We literally just had a conversation. Do you think like, but you know, here, like, I can't remember anything, you know?
Mark, where are your keys?
Right here.
Oh, I picked an easy one.
But see, here's the thing. These aren't actually my keys. I don't know where my keys are, so I've been living on the backups for over a month.
I fucking knew it. Called you, dude. Got you, dude.
Yeah, you
done,
did.
Bro.
But
that's okay.
Yeah, you know, today we're talking. We can't talk about the entirety of the Kardashev lore because in reality, it's like not that complicated. In fact, I would say the Kardashev lore starts off pretty basic because we were quite young and we didn't really know what we wanted to do. And I wrote the lyrics to the music in a week, right?
Yeah, and we used a lot of Wikipedia for that demo.
Not me. I did.
And then by the time we got to Excipio, I mean, it was mostly like Star Trek adjacent. Right.
Yeah. Excipio was a great album, but I wouldn't say there was a lot of like deeper meaning in the lyrics. Probably, I took them more seriously, but this album, Alinea, uses the Kardashev mythos to ask some interesting questions. And they're questions that developed as I was writing. I didn't necessarily have these in mind when I started writing. I understood the basic premise of what I wanted to be occurring in this album. I wanted it to be, well, I say we, but lyrically, I wanted it to be a direct sequel to the Almanac. Like literally, if you could timeline it, granted, you know, there's some space-time travel between the end of the Almanac and the beginning of Alinea, but for all intents and purposes, you hear with the way you wrote it, the two albums overlap. Like the end of the Almanac is symbolically meant to be the beginning of Alinea. So it is that direct of a sequel. I wanted it to be, you know, Kent, this character from the Almanac, having a long conversation, just a conversation between the two of them, the entire thing, with Atlas, who was first mentioned in the track Continuum on Excipio, but we didn't know that at the time. We didn't plan it ahead like that.
And they didn't have like their own name. They actually give themselves a name in Alinea. Before that, they were referred to as a Pathfinder, which is a type of biorobotic thing. And
I wrote these lyrics very much the same way as I like run Dungeons and Masters games, which is that I have a
Dungeons and Dragons. You're a dungeon master in Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
That was the most like boomer moment I think I've heard from you. It's so long.
Dude, like
when I was your age, we played Dungeons and Masters. Sorry, I'm done. Okay.
It's at least we don't call it like P&P, PP. We don't call it like
it's
Wiener
true.
Game.
Pen and paper. Pen and paper, dude. Yeah, that's what they say out here.
But I just have a basic premise and then I make a lot of it up as I go. And I like something in the past seems to fit. So I say, let's plug that in. And the main questions that this album proposes are I actually wrote them down because I was thinking about them yesterday, and I sent you that outline kind of late. You were probably sleeping.
I was. Yeah.
But you know, a lot of it is based on the morality, the moral questions of how we treat each other and interact. And it kind of poses questions like, is it moral to impart your expectations onto someone else? Is it ethical to create life when there will be pain, or is it unethical to give life a chance? And what responsibility do we hold when we are born into an inherited ethical debt that we cannot repay, or are we actually born into that debt at all? And the album does not answer these questions because I don't know. I have no idea. I mean, one of those questions is very highly like anti-natalist slanted, and I have a son. So, you know.
Yeah, I was going to say that too.
I'm just exploring things, but, you know.
Which is sorry to just interject on that. It's how we approach the bearing of shadows as well, which was exploring circumstances or conditions that none of us personally had gone through yet, but may very well empathize with.
Correct.
And that was kind of the part of that. So similar, how you're writing about stuff that you haven't necessarily experienced, so that doesn't mean you can't try to understand it.
Yeah. And no worries interjecting. I was literally about to popcorn Nico.
Popcorn me!
Yeah, I was about to popcorn Nico. You know, so you didn't write the lyrics, but you have read them and you know about them, and you, I'm sure, have some that you like. Your ear catches more when you listen. So, you know, do you have any thoughts as we open up this dialogue for people to enjoy? Maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's something that I think other people don't know about us is that geographically we live far apart, which also means that time schedules aren't as convenient as they once were when we lived down the street from one another for the first 10 years of the band. So now I actually get to kind of explore with you your intentions, because although I was there for you delivering the recordings and I was engineering them, I didn't get to really ask you like, hey, like what inspired that? Or why did you come up with this? Or did you have like a paradigm in your mind that you wanted to emulate when we produced it a certain way? Things of that nature, which are going to come from me. And if you remember, great. And if you don't, so be it. But the first thing you mentioned, and we might as well start kind of at the beginning of the album ultimately, is I have this interpretation of the way that we recorded and designed the opening track of Precipice Adore, and how it's fading in and you can hear Mark singing, but also it's in reverse, right? We reversed it, and then at a certain point it flips forward in time, and now you're singing the actual end of Beyond Sun and Moon. And I wanted to tell you this interpretation I have of that. I think you'll find it kind of fun, but you're kind of a naysayer when I pitch things at you, so we'll see how it goes. Yeah, he's going to kibosh me right now. But check this out. Imagine that Atlas is still like asleep on the planet, and the Killigon opens in front of him, but he's not really conscious. A person who could observe there, kind of like a movie, the camera is going to catch everything, but maybe the character doesn't know what's going on. I imagine that you would hear the end of Beyond Sun and Moon in reverse until Kent steps through it, and now it's in real time because they're both in the same time. Does that kind of make sense? Because that's how I see it in my head, and I'm just like, oh, sci-fi.
Well, and see, here, I don't know enough about physics to naysay you at all.
I don't know it either, but it's fun.
The other thing is the art is already made. At this point, you perceive it however you perceive it, and that's the thing about art. That's the point of art. When it's like, oh, let's take it this way, I can be like, I don't know about that. But if you were to tell me, like, Mark, when I listen to this album, I think of rubbing black licorice on my feet, I'd be like, okay, hell yeah, bro.
Here we go, dude. OnlyFans 2025. Watch out, baby.
Watch out. No, but I think that's a cool image. Because everything's getting warped and sucked through space-time. It like messes. I think that's a cool idea. I think that's really. It's kind of
a fun thought. So that was just kind of the fun thing. But I think you had a bigger question, which is just overall sort of my interpretation of the story and the lyrics and stuff. And before we really plug into the first track, I think I would say that because there are a lot of different vocal styles that you deliver on this album, we counted them at one point. I think it was 10, kind of unique. Whether or not you use them at length is kind of irrelevant. We were just having fun sort of quantifying your approach. I think that the delivery of everything has such a unique voice. One of my favorite experiences that I actually wrote about in college when we met at NAU was in a creative writing class, I was trying to compel the rest of the class to listen to a song by Amon Amarth, and simply because Johann Haig used his normal lows to just like narrate the story, but then when he gets to a dialogue moment, the one moment of dialogue in the whole song, he stacks his highs and his lows to give the voice an otherworldly, possibly godlike sound.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking that from a production standpoint, that's brilliant. And I love that delivery. And I feel like we had a ton of that opportunity in this album because it was a dialogue for the most part. So we got, in a way, in my mind at least, and we'll find out if there's truth to this, in my mind, when decisions are being made for certain vocal styles and you're delivering maybe a moment of dialogue or maybe internal reflection through that character's voice, I really do see it as like cinema. Cinema. No, not like that, but like I see it as like a movie in my mind, and there's a character on screen, and it's their internal or external dialogue kind of speaking, or monologue. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts. The philosophy side I'll kind of talk about when we get to those moments, but yeah, I think we should get started.
Well, I want to set the stage a little bit.
Okay, let's do it.
For, because we did get new fans with Alinea, and, there are a lot of people who, understandably so, don't know that Alinea is directly connected to, like, this story that we've told with most, but not all our releases.
For 10 years, intermittently.
For 10 years. And so, in this album, there are only two people ever speaking. There's no narration. It's all like, unless I'm forgetting anything, it's all dialogue, 100% dialogue. Okay. And the two characters are Kent, who we can't get deep into the lore of, Excipio and the Almanac. We don't have time, but essentially Kent is a being who was discovered as a cell floating in a little capsule outside of a space station as part of a Dyson swarm around the sun. And he never had an official name, but we as a band called him Kent because we just liked the idea. It's not even necessarily canon, but we just liked the idea that little capsule cell comes from Alpha Centauri. And if you take the first four letters of Centauri, it kind of looks like Cent or Kent. So Kent. That's the reason we called him that. And then Atlas, we've already kind of mentioned, he is, in Excipio, there's a song, I believe it's Continuum, that talks about how humanity has kind of both moved past their penchant for war and selfishness and greed, but also accepted that just due to the limitations of physics, they can't really explore the galaxy, the whole light speed thing. And so they create, and this is a good example of why you can tell I wasn't thinking about it at the time, they create the Pathfinders plural. But by the time we get to this point in the story, I've switched it, and there's one, and he's self-replicating, or they are self-replicating. Because I thought I just thought that was a cooler society to talk about. What if there was a society that was there? There was no sexual reproduction. It was all self-replication, and there was no, it did not have a lot of structures that we have. So there's no structure of ownership in the language of Alinea. You can't truly say that's mine or this is my cup. There's no way to actually say that. There's no gender. They don't have it. They don't need it. Right? There's no sociological gender, and there's no biological sex. They don't have either of those things. It's just not part of their society, right? And at the end of the Almanac, Kent he basically got too smart for these lowly humans. And so the Almanac is him traveling through space and time, trying to learn as much as he can. And what he learns is that you can't rely on intellect alone. You have to, we are emotional beings who thrive on connection, and you could know all the facts that you want in the world, but that won't keep you from feeling lonely and disconnected and purposeless. And so basically he goes back, and all the humans on the station where he grew up are gone. And I don't know if we'll ever answer that question. I don't think it's the point. Maybe we will, but I don't know if we will. And so he sees this structure called the Kiliagon, right? Which is, again, this is the end of the Almanac, which is a structure he created for humanity as a power source, and it turned out it could also be used as basically a wormhole. and he sees that there are some coordinates set into it, and he says, hell, I'll go through this and just see where I end up. And he does. And those coordinates were set from when humanity launched the Pathfinder through the wormhole, and he lands on the planet just as the Pathfinder has woken up. And that led to a very mythological voice being used on this album. There are a lot of things that don't make sense. For example, much of this album is Atlas, who again takes on the name for themselves, creating language to be able to communicate with Kent, who he calls Sky Brother. But he's speaking, so why would he need to create language? This album is very much symbols for the sake of conveying idea and emotion rather than creating a line by line, this makes sense sort of story. And, you know, I was really into Norse mythology for a long time. And you read those stories and they don't make a lick of sense, but it's not, those stories aren't meant to explain the world. They're meant to convey ideas and thoughts and concepts in a loose and broad way. And I really like that method of storytelling. So that is what I would say would be good to keep in mind as we listen through this. And so, Nico, yeah, I think what we'll do is we'll just listen to each song and we'll just pick out lyrics that we think are, we can't go line by line, but we can just pick out a line that we think is interesting. You can say, Mark, I think this one is interesting, and I'll point this one out. But I think it would be cool to listen to each song because I'm proud of the album.
Okay.
Well, and the people who want to watch it will watch it. You know what I mean? So if you want, you can share your screen and I'll just listen to it through your stream.
Okay, cool. Let's do it.
And I'll pull up the lyrics on Genius or something.
Or here, I'll just send you this link. This is the official document that you basically stamp of approval for.
It's always a risky game.
Yeah, it is. But you think Genius got it from somewhere else?
No, I know. I know they got it from me. That's like our homie in the community, Jetfire. He would be like, hey, this grammatical error in Alinea is pretty serious. And I'll be like, language is nuanced. Goodbye.
Yeah.
You know.
All right, let's do it.
I'm gonna light some incense, don't mind me.
Banger. Banger. Banger, banger, banger. All right, I'm going to pause it there. I have written out some questions here. And I think if it's cool if I start and then you can elaborate.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do it that way.
I think that's the best way to do it for sure.
Okay. So, lyrically, when someone's reading along with this, there is a character that we don't really use in English ever, and that's a delta. It's these 3 dots that kind of bracket a lot of stanzas. Mm-hmm. And I think it would be important for you to describe that that's not just a design choice. There's actually an intention behind that. Tell us what that is.
Correct. So anytime the reader sees those brackets, in mathematics it's the therefore symbol. And I'm not a mathematics junkie. I was literally searching for cool symbols to use, and it was like, hey, this looks neat. But essentially, anytime you see it bracketed in that, it's the Pathfinder, who will soon be named Atlas, speaking. And I went with the therefore symbol because, again, I'm not like I might not be using this properly in like the mathematics sense, but just the idea of therefore is very, very, I think, indicative of where Atlas is mentally. Every time he learns something, he's trying to, okay, so what's the result of that? What's the implication of that? I've learned something. What does that mean? Where does that put me? Where does that put you? So every time he creates a word or learns something or has a feeling, it's the first time. With this, Atlas is 5 minutes old. You know what I mean? And because he's biorobotic and has been loaded up with a bunch of basically personality subroutines and stuff, and
history and culture and sort of references.
And as this album goes, those things start to slowly rise to the surface. He is going through the process of what my son is going to go through from birth to 18, he's going to do in the span of a couple hours. And so the idea of therefore seemed very, very fitting to be an indicator that Atlas is speaking.
Yeah, and it also plays into the sort of bioroboticness of it, where he has a logical computation system before his biological pathways are sort of developed enough to feel the emotional side of things. He's just referencing a lot of data. So in a way, it's kind of this way of saying that computational patterns are beginning to be formed that may ultimately turn into the emotional pathways. So that's good to know that the what did you call it? The therefore symbol? The therefore symbol indicates when Atlas is the speaker or the thinker, depending on how it comes across.
Right, exactly.
So I had a couple questions about lyrical and delivery choices you made relative to the musicality. I mentioned earlier that Beyond Sun and Moon is what we had going from the very beginning of the track, but as the song begins and the verse opens up, the actual verse of the track, we actually hear Beyond Sun and Moon lead melody playing in there. And so I wanted to ask you, did you take lyrical inspiration knowing that we were coming right off of that song? Did you make any references here that you can remember that I haven't caught yet? Because as it stands, I remember that we referenced old music a lot to try and glue it all together.
We did a lot. And I did in the title. So the title, A Precipice, A Door, I can't remember, but in the almanac in epilogue, one of the things he says in Alinea when, because the prologue and the epilogue of the almanac are actually, you can think of those as unincluded lyrics in Alinea. They're extended conversations that Kent and Atlas are having, but in both it's just Kent speaking, and he's speaking purely in Alinea. And in the lyrics that open up the almanac, you could probably say he's talking to Atlas about that between track 1 and 2 of Alinea, and it's him describing coming through. And it's actually really cool. If you translate it, it talks about him going through that interdimensional portal and seeing beings and feeling like he's standing on a stone in the middle of the ocean, and this really crazy interdimensional stuff. And then at the end of that, he says, I don't speak Alinea fluently, so I'd have to find the lyric and translate it. I have most of the translations for this album available, but he says, I walked to the precipice and I stepped through the door.
That's right.
And so, yeah.
Yeah.
And so this song is called A Precipice, A Door, to further link both those things together, like you're mentioning.
That's so sick. I was kind of picking up on some other moments in there that my mind catches, like the key nouns, the key verbs, like the things that I can just be like, oh, that word is really reminiscent of this particular moment in a song because of the melody or something. Sure. And one of those was yeah, right here. Come now, we'll watch the twilight, which is something that the Pathfinder says after he says, can we be still? So you use a lot of like references, like I think it's in Precipice. There's a scream in, I think it's Lucido or maybe like Umbra or something, where you say like something be still. And then there's a reference here where somebody says, can we be still? But then in the background, somebody is singing, can't come now, we'll watch the twilight, but it's in the same melody as Come Now Wind, Take Me to the Planet's Edge.
Yeah, that was intentional, and I'm glad you picked up on it. So that line is both a reference to Beyond Sun and, or Between Sea and Sky, and how this album ends. So, you know, in Between Sea and Sky, he says, like you mentioned, come now wind, take me to the planet's edge. And Between Sea and Sky, another way to say that is on the surface of the water. If you're between the sea and the sky, you're on the surface of the water, right? And so it's a very, this album's not connected to liminal right, but it's a very like liminal space to be in. And the twilight is a very liminal time between day and night. And also, twilight is a commonly used metaphor for death, for like the moment of dying. And at the end of the album, it's, you know, I'm going to go ahead and spoil it. Atlas deactivates themselves.
Yeah.
So Kent is saying like, hey, and with Come Now Wind, that line, it's sung with a beautiful melody, but it's a line of frustration. You know, in the almanac, he's like, God, this boat is standing so still, and I am so used to like technology at my fingertips, and it's like, geez, wind, like pick up, let's go. And so Kent is basically like saying, yo, like, come and be my solution, like solve the guilt in me for leaving everyone I knew behind, because you are in essence their progeny, and in essence my progeny, and I can relieve my guilt through your existence and asking you to fulfill your destiny. But in saying let's watch the twilight, it's a foreshadow that he's not going to do that Atlas is going to unplug himself. So it ties together the beginning of the almanac and the end of Alanea to kind of create this like concise little 2-album package.
Wow.
Kind of neat.
I'm gonna have to re-dissect that. I think something that I often miss out on is prologue and epilogue from the almanac, because I'm always so focused on playing the music and not like just listening to the album start to finish. That I always miss out on those two pieces. Kind of like with Excipio. Most people know it as a 5-track album, but it's actually 6. There's a 6th track that was written by Maya that I forgot even existed until I went to the full album YouTube video, and I was like, there's another 6 minutes? Like, what is this? It was just really funny.
I'm kind of in the same boat, because I remember that it exists, but I don't remember what it's called. But like, I do remember that there's a song that's a Maya creation, you know, that he basically gifted to us. Thanks, Maya.
Yeah. Thanks, Maya. I appreciate it. Okay, two small questions, quick questions, and then we'll move on to track 2. One of them's not a question, but I just want to call out, dude, the bass line that Alex has in that middle, where you're saying, I think you actually say "Come Now Wind," but it's like the really delicate singing, and he's playing his Final Fantasy. Do 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 do.
I never noticed that he's playing the Final Fantasy. Is it the Final Fantasy arpeggio?
It is, and in musical terms, he's adding a 7th to a 3-part arpeggio, so it becomes a 4-part, and that's why you get that like nice walk in the piano of like Final Fantasy. He's doing the same technique, albeit in the key of our song, on bass, and that's what makes us feel like, oh, it feels like Final Fantasy.
So there is the first Final Fantasy reference is not in Reunion, it is in A Precipice, A Door. That's very cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and you can blame Alex for that. Yeah, it's cool. So last question for you, and then we'll move on. Does the line Ia dejveana undare have anything to do with tier 3 because the underlying melody is the tier 3 guitar part that opens the track. Dee doo 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 doo, and then we all come in together.
Oh, my phone's too close to my interface. I don't know about you, but when my phone's close to my interface, if I get a text, it's like.
Oh no, that's because you don't have enough technology mana left, so
Right.
everything around you is in chaos. Yeah, sorry about that.
As is the usual.
Yeah.
If I was smart, it would have, but it doesn't.
Okay,
that would have been a really good
okay.
thing to do. But it is kind of a fun line because so the line "Ia dejveana undare" translates as "I don't understand" or "know" meaning, like the concept of meaning. And one thing I really like about a lot of other languages like Spanish, French, other languages as well, those are the first two that come to mind, is like, you know, in English we have really one verb to know. Like I know you, Nico, and I know how to do long division. But those are separate things. One is a personal and emotional familiarity, and the other is a factual knowledge. And so here I use the personal and like emotional. So when he says "Ie dejveana undare," he's saying he's almost personifying the concept of meaning. He's like, I don't have this in me, because like when I know how to do long division, it's not something I feel internally. It's not something that provides me with any sense of identity. I don't connect with long division. I don't say like, man, I haven't hung out with long division in a long time, right? But you may feel like that with a community. So Vena is what he should have said, to be more grammatically correct, would be "Ia dejpainua undare," but he didn't say that, and so that's just an interesting little thing.
Okay, that's yeah, and
stolen.
I think it goes without saying.
Stolen. All of it's stolen from other languages, but yeah.
I mean, is anything truly unprecedented?
No.
I think it goes without saying, but Alunea has come a long way, and it's really cool that we still have like that the spirit of the child, as Gojira might say, within us to just express such a fun medium to kind of create art through. So let's go ahead and let's get into track number 2, which is called Reunion.
Let's do it.
And we'll see where it goes. Okay. And we'll pause it there. Dude, that's such a good song, man. Holy fuck.
Dude, so like I got a couple things I'm putting in the chat for you. You don't need to open them now, but I do want you to open them and share them as part of the stream in a second. But so
Okay.
the first track, like as you know, like I think the first track is fine. I don't like love it. I don't hate it. It's great. It's a great song. Track 2, when you and Alex wrote it and when Sean put on those drums, I remember being like, oh, this album's gonna be fun. I was like, oh, this album is gonna be a good time. Mark's gonna get to do some new things with that.
Oh, dude. Yeah, and how you roll that.
Oh, I've always wanted to do more of that because I'm a Travis Ryan fanboy, you know what I mean? So I've always wanted to do.
And
more
goblins
of
are your favorite species, and they kind of have that like snarly sound to their speech.
Goblins are my favorite fantasy creature. Everybody's like, oh, I like elves, and I'm like, grow up,
bitches.
Grow up. Maturity is
that.
liking the dudes who like look at little shinies and then go and then kill their best friend for him.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? Like that's maturing as an adult. You know, oh, but elves are so regal. Boo.
Boo.
No, I'm kidding. I actually like
Hilarious.
elves just fine. I think elves are great. My wife and I had a whole discussion last night about why I find dark elves and wood elves to be equally interesting. So I'm not anti-elf. I'm just trolling for the sake of trolling.
You're a
But
troll.
yeah, that was the first song.
You're not a goblin.
No, I'm not.
I'm just kidding. Yeah, so that was the first song that you were like, holy fuck, this album's
It's
gonna
be a good
have some
time.
opportunities for you to do some crazy shit.
Correct.
And listening to that, my first sort of like comparison from like the musical standpoint and the vocal delivery is this has the same energy as like Displacement, kind of.
Yeah, you know, it kind of does. You're right.
It has that like intensity, and you have like the kind of rapid fire vocal delivery. I think they call them shotgun vocals when they're really fast. I don't know what this would be called, but it feels like the faster of the vocal deliveries you do on most of our releases.
Yeah, and you know, I never understood, as an American, I never understood why they were called shotgun vocals, because unless you're rocking a semi-auto shotgun, it's
yeah, dude, it's a Spaz 12. You can just da 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 da.
Yeah, AA12 for the COD fans among us. You know what I mean? Because I got to rename them. But yeah, this album was when I really started to be like, oh, this is gonna be, even though this was one of the most absolutely miserable songs to track.
Why was it miserable? Just
the end, dude. The
Yeah.
end was so hard. Those high notes, like I had to, you know, some people may already know this, but I tried to do that one day and I got partway through it and I couldn't finish because those notes are not easy for me. So I came back to that. This album took us a long time to track because just crap kept happening. So we had initially booked a week and it ended up taking 3. Just I had a brand new baby and people got, it's just a mess. And so what I had to do is this was like actually one of the final things we tracked, because I took like 2 weeks, perfect sleep, perfect hydration, no
caffeine,
drinks, as little caffeine as I could possibly muster, right?
Yeah.
Vocal warm-ups and stretches every day. And even then, it was so hard. And it's, you know, like you can't really tell on the final recording, but some tracks are stereo, some tracks are mono. It's a little comped for sure. But I wanted to do it. I've always been the kind of person who like, I don't think one way is wrong over the other, but some people are like, my dedication as the vocalist is to the craft of being a vocalist. And therefore I refuse to comp a take because I will not fake anything. And for me, I'm like, I'll comp a tank because this song needs this sound. For me, my dedication is towards putting an emotion in somebody else's chest. And if I'm convinced that, then I'll stretch a note as much as I need to, even if I would never do it live. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I need the person listening to this album to be smacked into the clouds as hard as possible. And I'm not going to compromise that because, I can't sing a note. I'm going to push the note. I'm going to stretch the note. It'll be on the album and I'll never do it again. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
And
there are purists. There are purists in the just guitar world, the recording world. People who say like, don't more guitars on the album than you have members who play guitar. And to that, I would always say, like, what does it matter? I want the album to sound a very specific way, and it requires me to leverage the tools we currently have, which means I can record 12 guitars if I need to make it feel like a wall of symphonic guitar sounds. And I think the same techniques are available to vocalists as well, and the purists will argue it, but at the end of the day, it sounds the way we want it to sound, and a lot of people like it, so we did our job, and we feel good about how we did the job, so I don't think it should matter.
You know, I have a very strong internal, I agree with you, and I have a very strong internal, like, belief system, I guess, whereas that if a person is telling me something, okay, and, you know, they don't write my paycheck, they hold no legal authority over me, and they're not, like, checking me, like, morally, like, hey, Mark, don't steal from the gas station. Okay, that's good advice. I don't give up what they say. Like, oh, this guy on a YouTube channel says you shouldn't triple track your vocals. Well, he wipes his ass too, so I don't care. Like,
yeah, if that works for him, let him do that.
Exactly. But I'm trying to make, like, here's the thing. I am not a vocalist because I love the craft and the art of vocals. I'm a vocalist because I love making art, and that's the tool that was easiest for me to get started with. That's the whole reason why I'm not a guitarist, is because it was easier to scream. Not because I had this deep burning passion in my heart to be. I had a passion to be an artist, and this is the way that I happened to get there. So for me, if something's going to be artistic and beautiful, and if I'm going to put a feeling in somebody's chest, I'm going to do it. You know? And that's how I feel. Anyway.
Yeah. Haters be damned. All right, let's talk about the track.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the track. Something I wanted to mention is the beginning of this song is inspired by 1960s, like, slow dance music. If you listen to the guitar part and you reference, like, any slow dance song from, like, the Grease soundtrack or something, you'll hear the similarities. But the one that really stands out to me is not actually a slow dance, but it's like I don't think you would call it like an emo pop song, but it's My Chemical Romance, Ghost of You. Oh my God, what a song, dude.
Such a good song.
Anyways, beautiful song. I wanted to just mention that the music has that kind of inspiration. And then I also mentioned that I feel a lot of displacement vocal energy here, and it's because the song is demanding that of you, basically. So when we go through the lyrics, the first thing that I read in here is that it seems like you're talking about the Pathfinder again, which comes from Continuum, and displacement is right before that. The synthesis of flesh and their ingenuity, you a legacy breathing, O Pathfinder. You obviously just say it. But what references did you make there that maybe we didn't pick up on, the rest of us? Is there anything that you want to, like, reveal that would blow my mind?
I don't know if it would blow your mind. But before that, I do want to say this is the second time you've gotten a little doo-woppy with your writing. The beginning of Torch Passing.
It's true.
Like, I feel like I see, like, a bunch of, like, high school kids in the, like, mid 1950s, late 1950s at, like, a school dance, and that's the slow song. I love it, by the way. Like,
I think it's a nice texture, like a nice approach.
I've always thought it'd be cool to do a music video for Torch Passing that takes place, Me Without You's done it, other bands have done it, but takes place in a, like, 1950s, 1960s, like, the band is wearing, like, blue suits with, like, the red flowers, and I always thought that'd be really cool. But so with this, I'm actually trying to pull back on the symbolism a little bit so that the reader can know what the heck I'm talking about, at least enough. So the first line, there's really not a whole, or the first stanza, I guess, there's really not a whole lot deeper with it. You know, this is talking about Atlas, like, you know, the synthesis of flesh and their ingenuity. So people put together organic and, like, electronic components and created this Pathfinder character, and in very literally, Atlas is their legacy. And I always think of Atlas, like, for any Star Trek fans out there, imagine the Borg, but instead of scary and gross and awful, beautiful and inspiring and lovely. The same idea, but taken in a very different direction.
I think the genre sort of leaning people might consider, like, solar punk as the version of this. Because the first thought I had was, like, Terminator, but obviously that's destructive and more mindless. And this one, we're trying to make it more hopeful, more beautiful. And so solar punk feels like the the version of that exists elsewhere that we inadvertently might be referencing.
Yeah, solar punk for sure. Just minus the Pixar vibes, because I'm so sick of Pixar vibes, dude. I could live an entire lifetime. I could live an entire lifetime not seeing a Pixar vibe again. Okay. Yeah, I think that's a really good example. And then the line here, guiding nature with pre-written code, that's like the whole reason that Atlas is there, according to the people who built and sent them there. I keep saying him, but that's not grammatically correct, because he has no gender nor biological sex. But the whole purpose is to terraform the planet and then self-replicate and create the next society that is in spirit the descendant of humanity. So guiding nature with pre-written code, literally, we inserted a program into your brain to do this job. How very human to show up in a place and then be like, I'm gonna force it to be like this. What a very human trait, So yeah.
Okay. You also have a line in here. I saw you from the womb. Under 1,000 stars collapsing, ignorance gave way. And because it doesn't have the therefore symbol, it must be being said by Atlas. How did Atlas see Kent from... Wait, sorry. I meant it the other way around. Yeah, it's Kent speaking. How did Kent see Atlas from a womb? I mean, obviously it's not literal, but I'm curious what your perception was.
Yeah, so this is where things get symbolic again. So I saw you form in the womb under 1,000 stars is a reference to like... Kent was there when the Pathfinder initiative was undergoing, and under 1,000 stars, almost anytime you see the number 1,000 in a Kardashev Mythos release, it's a reference to the Kiligon. The Kiligon is a 1,000 sided sphere. That's the whole thing. And the reason we use the Kiligon is because, and again, I'm not a philosophy nut. I found one blurb on a blog and I was like, this is really cool. But apparently, there was a philosopher, Descartes, who utilized the idea of a Kiligon to say that you didn't have to fully be able, and it's a lot deeper than this. I am sure I'm not doing justice, but essentially you can't visualize a 1,000 sided sphere, but you could still create one. You can understand the concept enough to create it, even if you can't picture it perfectly in your mind. Like I can, in my mind, unless somebody out there is aphantasic, then you can't, which I guess further proves the point. But in my mind, I can envision a square and I can see it perfectly. But a 1,000-sided sphere, I see a sphere with like some, I can like look around, but I can't see all 1,000 sides equally. So this is the whole reason we moved that. And then, that's essentially, and then collapsing ignorance is a reference to lyrics in is it Continuum?
Which lyric? Collapsing ignorance gave way.
Yeah.
Collapsing ignorance gave way.
Yeah, there's a line.
I think it is Continuum.
Yeah, ignorance has collapsed, resources are redistributed to the development of machinery, autonomous self-replication. So that the opening line of Continuum is talking about creating Atlas. And I knew that they were creating Pathfinders, but I didn't have it this fleshed out at the time.
No, this was 2012. We were writing Excipio.
There's another reference. The second stanza of Continuum. This process will mirror natural concepts while guided by pre-written code.
Pre-written code. I knew that was an allusion as well.
Yeah, I forgot about that. I did it intentionally when I wrote this, but I forgot about that. Yeah, so there are a lot of moments where I straight up, because I remember what we really wanted to do with this album is like, we kind of want to let people know that we have been doing this. So there are a lot of parts where I straight up lift lyrics from old albums and just repurpose them. And I didn't plug into the ChatGPT and say, hey, can you reword this? I had somebody say that the other day, cheeky, and I was like, listen.
Yeah,
Have I used ChatGPT to make a meal plan? Absolutely. But don't ever insinuate that I write my lyrics with ChatGPT. That is not cool. I take offense to that.
That undermines a lot of effort that we put into what we do.
The main thing that I was a dash fiend, bro. I loved writing with dashes. Now I can't.
Because then it's a giveaway that it's GPT, right?
Dead giveaway. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. Okay. I got another lyric question for you here. It looks like Pathfinder i.e. Atlas,
Yeah.
is saying at a certain point, a new voice from the past here to join with mine. How can you have a new something that is from the past? Wouldn't that mean that you already know it?
No, super easy. Super easy. Like, let's say you learned something about the Ottoman Empire that you didn't know before. It's new to you. You know, it's new as in it's new as in it's fresh, right?
Okay.
You know,
I
knowledge
was going deep on that one.
knowledge can be new, right? And Kent is from the past. The Sky Brother, as he's called in this album, he is from the past. He warped however many millions or whatever years in the future, you know, and landed on this at currently desolate planet. You know, this is straight up me referencing Final Fantasy IX, song called Melodies of Life. You know that already.
Of course I do.
And it's a really loose allusion, but I actually put you're not going to get copyright for a 30-second, but I put a timestamp clip in there if you want to play it,
all right,
so the people watching can hear it.
All right, let me pop it really quick. Hold on.
Pop it.
Pop it like it's hot, daddy.
Okay,
here we go.
I knew something was coming.
Of course. And
I love
my
this
God,
song.
YouTube is garbage these days. Okay, here we go. 3, 2, 1.
Maybe.
Okay,
Dang.
3, 2, 1.
I still believe that you can call
Here it comes.
out my name. A voice from the past, joining yours and mine, adding up the layers of harmony. And so it goes on and on.
All right, pause it.
Wow, that's that's so beautiful. I love that
Dude,
so much.
The fucking organ, like
Yeah.
Uematsu, he's always throwing in like proggy moments here and there in his songs. It's like, ooh, here's a little. Like in this game, there's this song called "You're Not." The whole game is like very medieval, but very punk. Yet the same, like they've got electric. It's not quite steampunk, but it's not quite diesel punk. But there's this one song, and during the most important moment of the album, the game, and it's got like these chugging electric guitars. You're not alone. And then the final battle with the boss is straight up like a prog rock song. It's the weirdest thing. Uematsu doing Uematsu stuff.
What a legend, dude.
Oh yeah, dude. Oh yeah. But yeah, this whole song, there are a lot of final. I mean, the title is called Reunion, which it's a reunion of these people. It's poetic for the album. They've never met, but it's still a reunion because descendants, progeny, all this. But also, reunion is a reference to Final Fantasy VII, which I am a mild fan of. Here's my boy Sephiroth.
You know, I wasn't sure if you had ever played Final Fantasy until now.
No.
Yeah.
I've been simping Final Fantasy verbally to you for a very long time, Nico. You're well aware. I'm replaying Final Fantasy IX right now.
Of course you are, because you already beat Claire Obscure, so now you got to go back to the nostalgia.
Yeah, Claire Obscure is really good.
Yeah,
but yes.
incredible.
Anyway.
Okay. Last thing I wanted to say, and if you want to plug stuff in before we get to the next track, please do. The last thing I wanted to say was listening to this song. For some reason in my mind, I still really miss this like momentary guitar solo where you take a break singing the chorus at the end, which was right here, if you're still looking at my screen, right there. You sing this, and then there's a small break, and then it comes back for reprisal. And I had a small guitar solo there that now when I play guitar live on stream, I still throw it in. I'm like, fuck it, I like this version.
I don't remember that. I believe it. I don't remember it.
Yeah, I can send you a link. Actually, for those who are listening and care, if you're an Enlisted Traveler, you can go listen to that exact demo right now if you want to. Anyways.
Yeah.
So those are my things.
Yeah, this song lyrically is much more straightforward because I'm trying to bring the listener into the Kardashev mythos. Things are very straightforward. I will say that one thing lyrically is when you hear Atlas saying "etched in my code," that's a way of him saying like in his spirit or in his memory or in his internal sense of self. Like he doesn't have a soul, but he has code, right? And then, as everybody knows, the ending melody is a very strong allusion to the Final Fantasy VII main theme.
Yeah.
Listen, if rappers can sample stuff and do it so well, let me reference a melody. Leave me alone. Leave me alone.
I'm cool
but that's
with that.
it. This song lyrically is much more straightforward. Melodies of life, something good in flying birds. If only we remember. Great song. Great song, Nico. Love to see it.
You know, there are very few video game soundtracks that I can recall pretty distinctly. I would say that God of War 2018, I think it was. That one comes to mind. Bear McCreary.
You got me beat on that. I can't remember that one.
Final Fantasy X, The Hymn of the Faith, Xanarkand, I mean, Blitzball, like so many legendary tracks. But Claire Obscure is starting to hit that for me now. Like I play it on my guitar like every day. It's gosh.
So for me, it's most of the Final Fantasies. Obviously, Chrono Trigger, Chrono Cross. Yasunori Mitsuda is an unreal composer.
Goated.
Skyrim, Jeremy Soule, amazing.
Okay.
Amazing. Mass Effect, the Mass Effect soundtrack, all three games, phenomenal soundtracks. Gris, Journey.
Austin Wintory.
Austin Wintory? Yeah, dude.
Yeah. Journey. Oh man, yeah, it's Abzu. Oh, Abzu.
Abzu's got a great soundtrack. Abzu's got a great soundtrack. Soundtracks are one of the things I think that really stuck with me about JRPGs. Although JRPGs, when they got a bad soundtrack, oh my god. It's a little too much for me. But when they're good, I mean, even Kingdom Hearts with its rework of Disney songs, but all like the Halabastion song, Yoko Shimomura, she killed it. Great stuff.
I think that's one of the we're gonna get to the song, but that's one of the best things about video games is it's a blend of music, cinema, and like puzzles, like all three things kind of all at the same time. I remember the first time I saw like I think they were called FMVs, which is when they had like a pre-recorded, like highly rendered sequence. The first time I saw that, and I think it was Final Fantasy VIII or something, and I was just like, is this what the game? I mean, of course, I didn't have a reference point of the future at that point, so I was just like, this game's gonna be amazing. And watching this like animation of the game, mind blowing, dude. Loved it.
That right there is one of the first moments. So what you're talking about, the music and the FMVs, part of the reason I love Final Fantasy so much, especially Final Fantasy IX, is it taught me how much music and story could do. Because prior to that, I was playing Spyro, A Bug's Life, Super Mario, and those are great games with great soundtracks. But for example, big spoilers for Final Fantasy IX. For example, Uematsu has themes for characters he writes. This is a technique called leitmotif. And there's a theme for the main, pretty much the main villain of Final Fantasy IX, Kuja, who is also like the hottest character and all. Like you see a Kuja cosplay, a really good Kuja cosplay, and you're like, oof, yeah, looks good.
I'm going to incognito as we speak.
Yeah, Kuja cosplay. Kuja's a stud. And he's evil. So, he's got that bad boy energy. But anyway, yeah, like that dude, the third one. She, dude. Yeah.
God dang, bro.
Very, very, very attractive. But anyway, So Kuja has this theme, and we used it in our D&D game as
Makudas?
Jandro.
Oh,
when
Jandro.
got bad. So the theme is, it's got that doof, 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 doof. Okay, so that's Kuja's theme. At the very beginning of the game, there's a moment where the princess is fleeing the castle, and the queen, her mother, goes crazy, and in an attempt to catch her, she actually launches a bomb creature that also explodes like a bomb at the ship. And as the player, you're like, this doesn't make any sense. If she wants to capture her daughter, why would she put her daughter at so much risk by blowing up the ship she's escaping on? Well, there's a reason. And the ship crashes into the forest, and it's just playing this beautiful, tense music. And as the ship crashes, very soft in the background, it goes. And you learn later in the game that Kuja is manipulating the queen and like mind controlling her with the mist. And so he's behind that attack. And also in the game, Kuja, he's not from Gaia, but he makes his living on Gaia as an arms dealer. So where did she get that weapon?
Wow.
And Uematsu knew it. And he Uematsu spoiled the story of Final Fantasy IX within the first hour of gameplay, and you didn't even know. And that is impressive. That is impressive.
Really
So many composers, dude, like so many video game composers, they'll be like, oh, this is the desert level. I have to use music that's like, right? And
or it's in harmonic minor, so it feels like Middle Eastern music.
Exactly. That's what I was trying to do, but I did a terrible job.
That's okay.
And you're like, that seems accurate. That's what I get, and that makes sense. But Uematsu utilizes leitmotif, and he writes for the moment that's happening less than the stereotype of the setting. Like, if you go to Lindblom is this big steampunk city, but there are no sounds of gears. There are no sounds of... It's like this really kind of oddly plodding along song. But that's because most of the time you control a character who plods along. And then in Final Fantasy... Okay, I gotta shut up.
I was about to say, I think I wanted to cut you off because...
Yeah, it's his songwriting is unreal. It's unreal.
Mark, I would love to hear a podcast of you just talking about it.
Well,
I do
last
know.
thing I'll say, if you've played Final Fantasy VII, go listen to Under the Rotting Pizza and tell me that song is not the sonic personification of the architecture of Midgar. And if you disagree, I'll eat my hat. I'll eat my hat. I heard your dad say that once, and I was like, I'm taking that forever. I'll eat my hat.
That's a really old saying, I guess.
Yeah, oh, yeah. Well, your dad said it, so of course.
It must be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, let's get into...
let's keep going.
Let's get into track 3 here.
Yeah, let's do it.
Seed of the Nut.
Our function and form made to hold the names from before. Those I love live in your bones, guiding you a star in the sky. Pathfinder all alone. Now show your face to the setting sun. And hold each blade of the grass you've grown with words you've spoken. Sent from earth and across the stars. Now carve the stone
Dude, that's a fucking Kardashev song, man.
That's a fucking banger, dude. Holy shit,
that's a
bro.
fucking Kardashev song. Like, man.
Wow.
When this album came out, there were a couple of reviews where they were like, they've abandoned death gaze, and it's like, first of all, we do what we want. Second of all, no, we didn't. Oh my God! Just because somebody put something else on your plate doesn't mean they took something away from it. The whole second half of this song is death gaze's farts, bro. And man, what an easy song to write vocals to. There are just so many good opportunities that you guys created when you composed this. One of my favorite things, this is something that you may not know is a Nico trait, but this is something you do a lot in this album. But you'll have a legato lead with staccato doo, 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 on like rhythm chug underneath. Of course, you do that. You wrote it. But it creates a really cool, but the guitars underneath go dum 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 dum. Oh, fucking! I love that shit. I love that shit.
The merit. This is so funny you bring this up, and I appreciate you recognizing it. But that is a great example of like me finding the thing that makes me like want to build the song. Like the moment I'm just that one little boom, 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 and I'm just like, oh, and then you want to build a song around it. So I love that you called that out.
Dude, it's the whole song is amazing, but that part, I remember when I was writing the lyrics for that, when it picks up into the black metal, like the whatever blast beats, I was like, okay, so we're still doing Kardashev shit. Okay, hell yeah. All right, hell yeah, bro.
Yes.
And so that leading into it, I was like, Nico's basically saying like, do this, and I'm gonna pick up that alley-oop. You know what I'm saying?
That alley-oop. So I love that you called out that specific part, because I have a note here, and I was just gonna say it how I wrote it. One of your best skills is just shutting the fuck up at the right time.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, James from Aegean, for teaching me
Yeah,
that.
James Martin. Dude, I listen to a lot of music, not nearly as much as you do, but I do listen to a lot of music, and I will get honestly frustrated by vocalists who are just like, I'm better than anything happening behind me right now, and I'm going to tell you why over and over. And I'm like, You're good, dude. Let there be music also. And so I just wanted to shout you out, because you know when to be quiet, and it feels like it's always at the right time. And that's great.
Thank you. I appreciate
You're
it.
welcome.
I think
it's a skill that
really good job.
It's a skill that a lot of people could learn, is what I'm saying. Okay, so See You the Night. My favorite line from this, and I want you to know I have this distinct memory living back in Arizona, writing this record, but having enough of the record done to where I had at least your demoed vocals, and having it in my ears and walking to like this park in my dad's neighborhood, and just sitting there like at sunset and listening to this fucking song on repeat because of this line. Now show your face to the setting sun and hold each blade of the grass you've grown with words you've spoken. It is like I could make a fucking movie about those 15 words, however many words they are.
Yeah.
And it is my favorite thing ever. Tell me about it. I don't want to keep talking. Just tell me about it.
So yeah, this song, even though I think Reunion is one of the fan favorites, I think this song moving forward is where the lyrics really begin to take form. And so the opening here is essentially, it is the first two stanzas before Atlas says you come from far off and across. So these first two stanzas, which are Skybrother or Kent talking, are basically him kind of so full of idealism that he's missing the point. And because Atlas has already said multiple times, like, hey, this is a lot for me to take in, and Kent, Sky Brother, he's like so excited. He's like, you're built for all these great things. You have so much promise. You have so much, there's a whole legend inside of you, you know? You are function and form, which that is a line because for a while we were very into minimalism, and or at least I saw minimalism as like the perfect aesthetic, which I don't anymore. But when we, you know, it's a throwback to when we were writing a lot of Kardashev material, we were very into minimalism and form follows function, right? So Kent is basically saying like, you're perfect. You hold the names of from before, those I love live in your bones, guiding you a star in the sky. You know, guiding you a star in the sky is a reference to a letter that Kent wrote to the Doctor, that you can get in the special edition, the special digital. I don't even know if it's still available, where he writes to his mom like, hey, you know, this is why I have to leave. His mom.
Right.
This is why I have to leave. And he says, you know, you were always my guiding star, you know, my mother.
Yeah.
And so this whole thing is like him, and he doesn't realize, and I think that that's something really important. This song speaks to me a lot as a dad, because, you know, I have all these hopes and dreams for my son, for Evan. One thing I do is I'll buy him birthday presents for when he's a different age. So for his 10th birthday, it's in the closet. I bought him this really nice version of The Hobbit, and I wrote him a letter that's in the front, and I'm going to give it to him on his 10th birthday. And for his like 15th or 16th birthday, I bought him a special, it was like $200, a special edition of the art, direction, and the lore of Elden Ring. Because I don't know if he'll ever play it. I think Elden Ring is one of the most beautiful video games ever created.
Undoubtedly.
And I would, you know, I think 15, 16 is a appropriate age to see some of that shit, because there's some shit in that game. But at the same time, I have to recognize, you know, he might not give two shits about that. And as his father, it is my responsibility to meet him at his interests, you know. But it's easy to get caught up in these ideas that he's going to be this version of himself that he's excited for. But it is fundamentally morally wrong, I believe, for me to lean into that. You know, I don't give a shit about football, but if he's into football, you better believe I'm going to learn all the rules and find a favorite team. I don't know a damn thing about fashion, but if he's into sewing and making his own clothes and he's doing like makeup tutorials, you better believe I'm going to be like, oh, is that the new color pack from this influencer? Oh, no
from
way.
Revlon?
You know, I'm going to be like, I've never seen that eyeshadow with that blush. Is that a new? I don't know what the hell I'm saying right now, but I'm gonna learn. You know what I mean? And it's very easy as a father and as a parent to get caught up in who you think your kid's gonna be, and there's no chance. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. And so, you know, that's what the opening of this song is talking about. Because there's so much, like, if people go back and they listen to the albums in the Kardashev mythos, there's so much that leads up to this spot. You know, my computer is like, the fans are going crazy. I'll pull it out. It's
an overtime. Yeah, we'll edit it out. It's okay.
Yeah, I'll pull it out. I'll denoise it.
But yeah, you're right. There's 4 albums of lore. Well, 3 that build up to this 4th.
Yes. You know, and you know, it's interesting. A lot of people, I know that you know this, but a lot of people may not know this, but you know, I am not religious anymore, but I grew up very Christian. And it has a huge impact on my life. And, you know, you're not going to catch me in church, but, you know, part of my healing from coming away with that was accepting that there are times when I think that way and I write that way through those symbols. And oftentimes that's when my best lyrics show up. You know, so when it's, there's a very intentional allusion. Now show your face to the setting sun and hold each blade. And I hang on blade because it's like hold each blade. That's a very aggressive thing, right? Hold each blade of the grass you've grown with words you've spoken. Yeah. So you'll notice that Atlas, at this point, he has been creating, he's been terraforming, right? And he speaks it into existence, you know,
right? Let
there be light. Let there be a firmament between, you know, land and sea, or it's been a hot minute since I read. I mean, like, I think the last time I read the Bible was like 15 years ago, right? So I can't quote it anymore, but it is that, you know, because I wanted this to be mythological. I wanted this to feel like mythology, and you know, feel however you want about it. The mythology of the Bible's it's a good read. You know what I mean? It's a good read, if anything, at least just for entertainment value. But yeah, I could go on. But there's another reference: carve the stone into cities as your coding has foretold. Again, coding is a reference to his soul. So he's not just saying like, you know, he doesn't, and this is something we do as parents all the time. We say things that are demeaning and we don't realize it, you know, like you were made to do this. And it's like, okay, so that's all I'm worth, living out your dream, terraforming this planet. Thanks, Dad.
The pop culture, I think, equivalent of that is with what's it called? Rick and Morty. When he's like, what is my purpose? And he's like, you pass salt. And he's like, oh God. And like, that's the whole reason he made the robot was to just pass the salt across the table. And the realization kind of puts this robot in this existential dread moment. Similarly, what you're saying is like, sometimes we speak with our perception kind of woven into the way that we speak, the way that we deliver the sort of want or intention or whatever. But that doesn't mean that that is also what they want. That's just what we know to be truth until they tell us differently or we realize differently.
Yeah, that's that. I've never seen Rick and Morty, but that scene, if I'm understanding it, what's your purpose what's my purpose to pass salt? Oh God, like that's kind of what this album is.
Totally.
What's my purpose? To terraform and make us all happy from living our legacy. Oh God. That's oh God, you know.
Glassy eyes closed, dude.
Yeah. But anyway, that's the answer to your first question.
Okay. So in here, I kind of wanted to ask this question on a different song, but I think now's a good time to bring it up.
Sure.
Do you have a moment in this song that you're particularly proud of, lyrically or performance-wise?
You know, I think I'm really proud of this song. I think this is one of the best on the album for all of us, and I think lyrically, I like that there are many tipping points of the album, but you know, in this album, Atlas pulls upon the name Atlas, and I got the mythology wrong. On his back was the earth. Somebody corrected me. They're like, Atlas held the sky, not the earth, and I'm like, poop.
Interesting. Okay,
but it's out there now. But you know, because if you think about it, like at this point, they're fairly deep into the conversation, and Kent Skybrother has not said this guy's name. You know, you know, no questions about him. Nothing. It's just imposing. And so, interesting. You know, Atlas stops and he's like, hold on though, like who even am I? Like what? Like you're telling me all this stuff I gotta do. I don't even know what I am. And so he takes on this name of Atlas because the story rises to the surface. Remember I mentioned like as he's alive, all the stuff that's been loaded into his system starts to rise to the surface because he's carrying human mythology, human history, because they want that to be carried forward, right?
Right.
And so he names himself Atlas, and he names himself Atlas because the burden is almost unbearable. And Kent's just like, yeah, that makes sense. So check it out. You can make, you know what I'm saying? And that only further pushes him into this sense of kind of like existential chaos. You know?
Yeah, and I think what's cool is that going back to how we sort of started this video, this is a philosophical lens of questions being asked that we ultimately don't necessarily know the answers to, and we don't try to answer. But there's an absolute parallel in reality when children, I would imagine, I'm not a parent, but I can observe the world around me, when children are brought up with certain indoctrinations and expectations of them, that they then, by the time they hit a later stage, which we're in song 3 of Atlas being awake now, and he's been told by Kent, like, you're going to do this, and you're going to terraform, and you're going to carry forward the bones and the DNA.
Yep.
But now by song 3, which maybe is a few hours, few days, I don't know how long it's been, but into them knowing one another, like you said, he doesn't even know his name. And so this is where maybe in reality, we see children become teenagers and find their identity. They're finally discovering themselves versus just being bombarded with like truth and reality and what's right and what's wrong. And you're going to learn how to do algebra. And this is how you spell things. And you always put periods at the end. And it's like, it's like, okay, cool, but also there's so much more that I need to figure out for me specifically that's not part of the broader existence, or as Pink Floyd might have said, being another brick in a wall sort of thing.
Sure.
Right? So
Yeah.
I love that this is part of the discovery, and you're kind of viewing it through the lens of a parent, and also like the religious aspect. This is cool.
I think that's a keen observation. You know, oftentimes the more we push our children to be something, the more they resist. I mean, even now, Evan is going to be 3 in September, but even now, like the best, for example, you know how I get him to eat his vegetables? I don't ask him to eat them. I go and I get a cucumber and some ranch, and I sit down and I start eating them. And then I see him looking at it, and I say, "Oh, this is Daddy's cucumber and ranch. It's been a really hard day, so I'm having a nice, yummy, healthy snack." And he'll be like, "I want to try it." And I'll go, "Do you want some?" And I'll be like, "Okay, I'll share with you, because I want you to be happy with a snack. We can be happy together while we eat this snack." And then I'll give it to him, and I like it. And I'm like, "You know what, Evan? It's making me happy to see you eat that. You can have the whole thing." And he eats the fuck out of it.
Vegetables secured.
Vegetables secured. Yeah. So, you know, the other thing with that though is that sometimes he doesn't eat the cucumber, and I got to be cool with that. So, really, like, the best way to get your kids to have what you deem is the best outcome is present them with the options that you think are best. And if they choose those options 30% of the time, you're doing pretty good. And the other 70% of the time where they're like, "No, I just want to eat this cheese stick and be constipated tomorrow," you're like, "Okay, well, I'm going to allow my child this opportunity to learn. I'm not, okay, eat the cheese." And, and sometimes it works out. So yeah.
We'll see if he catches on with the effect of his decisions.
I wish absolutely knows. He will straight up like the next day there's this very toddler thing. Anybody who watches this who has toddlers, you're playing, and then your kid all of a sudden looks at you like this, and then they run to the corner and they go, and I'll be like, "Buddy, you pooping?" And he'll be like, "I'm constipated." And I'll be like, "You constipated?" And he'll say one of two things. He'll say what he ate too much of. He'll be like, "Too much cheese," or he'll say, "I didn't eat a variety of foods." And I'm like,
"Oh my gosh, dude."
That's right. And then sometimes he'll say, "Go away, give me privacy." And I say, "Okay." And I let him stand in the corner by himself. But other times he'll go, "Hold my hand." And I'm like, you need to hold hands through this poop." And he's like, "Uh-huh." And I'm like, "Okay." So I sit beside him and I hold his hand, and I'm like, "You're okay, buddy. You're going to get it out." Then we give him some prune juice, and he's fine. It's hilarious.
Wow.
I love it.
So, first of all, thank you for such a visceral anecdote that is now going to be locked in time on the internet about your son. And on his 16th birthday, when you deliver him this gift, you should let him watch this video on his 16th birthday in one day, just so you're like, "I've been planning this for so long." I wish I could do that with my cat, but they don't get cause and effect nearly as well as a toddler does. So my cat eats the other cat's food and then just has liquid shits for a whole day. And I'm like, "See, it tastes good, but it doesn't feel good."
Oh, Pudge.
All right.
Pudge will never.
Yeah, poor Pudge, dude. All right, let's bring it back in. I got one more thing about this song that I just want to let people know about because it makes me excited.
Sure.
Your opening vocal melody. "You are function and form, made to hold the names from before." I play that on the guitar while you sing, "You came from far off and across," or excuse me, you scream. Yeah. "You came from far off and across, where there were millions had seen your face." I'm playing the and I'm actually playing the same exact melody that you start the song with. And I think that's beautiful, and we really do that well for people who have a critical ear. They catch on to how you'll sing something, and then later or earlier in the song, I play it in the melody, and I think that's really lovely.
Well, yeah, this song kind of got created because I wrote a melody with different lyrics. It was, "Ehuna sat by the fire, planting every seed of the night.
The night.
Shadows crept out from the something." And you really liked it, so you created a lead, and then we kind of built it from there. The only other thing.
The fuck?
Actually, no, I don't really have anything else. Like, I will say, you asked performance-wise. Anything I'm proud of? I love and if you remember, I'm sure you do, we did multiple takes because I wanted to get that tuen to be very very pain, like "Ueil duazue vatuen," you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's a cool example of Alanea grammar, because like this sentence is a really cool part of Alanea grammar, because Ueil is sky, duazue is sky, but the owner okay, so Ueil duazue is sky, Eva is like to move, to like shift, and then tuen is dark, but tuen is more
with
dark.
2 U's.
Yeah, you not pronounce tuen is more dark or darker. And the ownership of, like in English, we would say the sky's darkness, and we put that ownership on the sky, apostrophe S. But in Alanea, they think more about association versus ownership. And so they would say the sky darkness apostrophe S. They would put the ownership on the thing that's being associated with rather than the person who has it. And that was an attempt by me to like sort of shift the hierarchy. Like this is my cup. I am above this cup and it is inside of my ownership. Now instead in Alanea, it's, you know, this cup up here is something that I am currently associated with. That's more how they would think of it. And so there's a lot of really interesting grammar, and then they don't have like, so what that means is is the sky is getting darker, is what that line means. It's kind of cool.
Awesome. Yeah, and one thing we got a call out in the comments on the music video, but we also said this when you were delivering this in the studio, is that it feels very much like a haka in its delivery. Right?
Like yeah, that was not intentional, but I'm more than happy for it to seem like that. Yeah,
but maybe it just has a similar like emotional origin. But yeah, I just that thing gave me chills, especially when I hear it now versus when you were recording. I'm just like, oh God, it's so powerful, so raw.
You know, and I think it is possible that was a subconscious accident, because I do think one thing I think is just like really cool is Maori culture. I think it's really just beautiful, the mopo tattoos that they get and the language and everything. It's just a beautiful culture, and I think that haka is one of the most beautiful artistic expressions that humanity has ever come up with. And I was listening and watching a lot of haka online, and so, you know, maybe that snuck through, because I love it.
Yeah. The inspiration comes from the subconscious oftentimes.
Exactly. And the last thing I'll actually say is there's one important line is Alunea dagwa swaltuen. Because the line Alunea dagwanai, right, means Alanea, language of mourning, but mourning they use poetically to mean beginning or first. So the line Alanea dagwanai, if you translate it literally, means Alanea, language of mourning, but really it means Alanea, the first language. And so here Atlas is saying Alanea dagwa swaltuen, Alanea, the language of night, meaning the last language. And so this is the first indication of him saying like, maybe this ends here. Maybe this is as far as this goes.
There's a ton of foreshadowing right there if anybody was using the dictionary to decipher it along the listen, dude.
Yeah, and there's some grammar in there that I don't really remember all the details of. Jetfire, where are you? Right.
Soal
tuen. Yeah, soal tuen is So soal is a root word that is associated with, I believe, like day. Yeah, soal, like soal is day or sky or something. You find it. So for example, soaleil is today. Like that's the word for today. You know, soaliel. So anything relating to day or like the celestial bodies of the sun and moon. And if you look, what's the word for darkness? Tuen. Soal tuen. Night. Root word day. And the root word day is really related to soul, because the language of Alanea is formed upon the pre-loaded code that has been put into him, which is why you see words like quachne for a person, quachne, carne, meat, flesh. There are moments where, anyway, we can go to the next song. And I said we should do this in one video, but I think we're gonna have to do this song and then split it into two.
Yeah, I think you're right, because it's coming up on some meetings.
It's coming up on some meetings. So let's do one more song, and then we'll schedule it off camera. Let's do one more. This will end on the collab with Aaron, Genital Shame, and it's a very good song.
Yeah, this one is Speak Silence, track 4. Here we go.
Mm-hmm.
Silence, what came before me? On the horizon I see it rise, infinite more of me. My choice is their choice. What would I say to them now in the light? Where
Okay, I'm gonna make a note here that we ended on 2013 is the timestamp. Okay, I have a good amount of thoughts. Hopefully, we can knock it out in like 20-ish minutes.
Yeah, we can do that, I'm sure.
I really love the development of this song. In that, as you're listening, it feels like it's almost asymmetrical, just in the same way like post-rock can feel repetitive, but then you realize you're arriving somewhere. This one feels like you arrive somewhere when we get that whole change up from 4/4 to 6/8, and Alex is like boom doo 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 doo. It's like, and then Aaron comes in, but also there's another parallel that follows that pattern, and that is that Atlas is sort of monologuing or self-reflecting. Whoops, sorry, I went back too far. Is monologuing or self-reflecting the whole song until we get that change up where then Aaron's part comes in and it becomes like a dialogue or a duet, however you want to call it. And so it also has that asymmetry until the arrival at the sort of above the clouds feeling moment. Was that intentional, or did I kind of like shine some light on that just now?
No, I never really thought about that, but you're right. They don't start talking to each other until that change in the song. I had no intention of it working that way, but it did work out that way. And that's a really cool observation. I had no idea, but it is interesting. Yeah. And that is such a good speak a vision loud as truth. It's one of the coolest moments of the song. I think that change with the whole composition. So yeah, very cool insight.
Yeah.
I never noticed that.
So I'll start at the top with my notes here. So the first thing that caught my ear was, on the horizon, I see in your eyes infinite more of me. What is that talking about?
So I actually, as you know, and as many fans already know, the album Precipice is not related to the Kardashev mythos. But I always really enjoyed, there's this idea, and I think this comes from my enjoyment of religious and mythological stories, even though I'm not religious today, which is this idea of being overtaken by a power that is greater than you. One of my favorite songs, anything really, but like some sort of like religious or spiritual experience. And when I say that, I don't mean going to church and believing in God. Spiritual experiences, it's a psychological phenomena. A religious experience is, and you don't have to be religious. You can be the most atheistic person in the world and go out to the woods and just be overtaken emotionally, just like torn apart. And that's really more what I'm talking about. I don't really these days have a lot of interest in the realness of it or not. I am more than happy to talk about religious experience and the beauty of religious stories and how those things can be very beneficial for our lives. But when people start trying to get into like apologetics and proving that something's real, I'm like bored. Because that for me is the least, is God real, is the least interesting part of the conversation for me personally, right? And in Precipice, I, again, pulled from my religious upbringing. There's a line, millions of embers have gone out behind my back. 400 billion more stare at me from the dull horizon. Where do I stand? What claim to make? So I will let the scales fall from my eyes, for here in this light I am speechless. And that is a reference to the story of Saul of Tarsus being just blasted by God, basically, and God being like, yo, why are you killing all my people? And Saul basically being so overcome by the glory of God that he goes blind and his whole life is changed, right? Which, just gorgeous symbolism there, beautiful symbolism there. And I always liked that. So this is actually a repurpose of the lyrics, because when I wrote those lyrics, I was asking myself, I was just born, and now I have all the things that have been done before me, and I have all these unborn people in front of me, and what is my moral duty and obligation? And this was really a question for myself. Precipice was much more of a self-reflection album. What does that mean for me? I'm just a guy, like, the only reason I'm alive is because at one point my parents were horny and now I'm here, right? And now I've got all this responsibility put on me to do the right thing. And the older you get, the heavier that gets, because when you're a kid, you're like, America's cool. And then you take some history classes and you're like, America's kind of cool. And then you like learn about like colonialism and like slavery and like just the brutal treatment of like Native Americans and the continued like just destruction of everything, and you're like, you know, you're like, ugh, and then you're like, I'm gonna get into my family tree, and you do, and you're like, ugh, delete, close.
Yeah.
And you're like, man, I did not ask to be a part of all this. I did not ask to have it all behind me. And what responsibility do I have going forward? And I don't know. And, you know, at this point in the album, I kind of realized that Atlas was having that experience. So I rewrote those lyrics for this because it felt entirely appropriate. And if you look at the lyrics side by side, they're very clearly rewrites of each other. Very clearly rewrites of each other. So that's what that's about.
Awesome. The reference to Horizon, interestingly, Horizon is used a lot in our sort of lyrics across the board. Something I wanted to mention with what you were describing is it's interesting how we have this Kardashev mythos canon, like lore, and the things that are canon to it. But within Kardashev's discography, there is the lore and then there's everything else. And you use allusion within the lore to everything else at times. So there's like this mythological allusion to this parallel mythology that's totally asynchronous and doesn't even have anything to do with these stories, but you still reference them kind of as like a fan service, but also an enjoyment of your own writing process. And I think that's really sick. That's the same thing I do with melody. I'll pull a melody out of Peripety, not because it fits with the story and not because I'm doing light theme, but because I think I want the same emotional feeling that was in that moment of the song I'm referencing.
And that's how Kardashev writes music. Yes, we have story. Yes, we have concept. Yes, we have ideas. But our dedication is always to the emotion of the song. And like you were talking about with Amon Amarth, in this album, I do the complete opposite. There's no vocal style that is dedicated for anybody because I'm more interested in the, you know, if the listener doesn't read the lyrics, I at least want them to have a specific emotional experience. So I'll use a voice that I used for Atlas for Sky Brother because it's the right emotional moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's the right emotion to deliver in that moment. I just want to go on the record and say before I get to my next point, in Lucido, on Peripety, you do the highest high ever, and it's in the most powerful and emotional moment there. You say, and what do you say? There in my dreaming, I was pressed to the ground, but it is like higher than your highest highs have ever been. And I'm getting chills just thinking about it right now, dude. Oh God, I love that delivery. Anyways, so the next point I had about the lyrics was one of the real world comparisons I have for the line, "Must I form this earth as the homelands you describe," which is so much going back to the must our children bear the demands of the father or the forefather, or, you know, whatever it is. Like, do I have to do it as you say? Like, do I have to? Like, it's kind of what it comes down to. But must I form this earth as the homelands that you described? And it's kind of all of this self-reflection, but also like, what's the word? Rhetorical. It's also rhetorical questions to Atlas. Pathfinder is basically saying like, hey man, do I really have to do all this stuff? Because I don't even know who I am yet. And now you got all these demands on me. And it reminded me, at least in a similar sense of, not in theme, but in it's a new world and you have these responsibilities, to the story of Pocahontas for some reason. Like, these travelers get here to a new land and they're like, cool, we're gonna like own it and colonize it. And there's like people there and they're like, hey, do you have to? Like, is that, it would be cool like if you were just like, if you thought about it for a minute. And I think there's a similar vibe here that Atlas is at sort of asking Kent. So do you have any thoughts on that?
It certainly isn't intentionally meant to be that way, but I think you can take it that way, and it makes a lot of sense. Like, I remember you don't hear this word anymore, but I heard this word a lot growing up, and it was always used in situations where I didn't realize at the time it was incredibly demeaning, but Americanized. We'd be at church, right? And we'd get the new family, and it'd be like a Filipino family, like Filipino immigrants or African immigrants, and everybody would be like, oh, like they're such nice people. I don't think they'll have any trouble getting Americanized.
Whoa.
Whoa. Yeah, gross, bro. Gross.
Way gross.
And I think that you know, I wasn't thinking about that when I write the lyrics, but we really do, as humans, like, what's the first thing that like is it not interesting that your apartment where you live right now, that room looks very similar to the one you lived in with your dad, which looked very similar to the one that you lived in the apartment. You go to a place and you immediately make it familiar, and we do that. Sometimes to destructive degrees, sometimes just for comfort. It's not always bad, but that is our tendency. We go to a spot and we're like, this is beautiful. How can I bend it to my will? You know?
Yeah.
That's what we do. It's like it's almost inherent and subconscious in like humanity in general. So I do think you can take. I don't know enough about the historical story of Pocahontas. I know it was not good. No surprise. But
yeah, shocker, right?
I think you can. I think you can draw, you know, some illusions conceptually there for sure.
Okay. I'm gonna move on to a really a deep cut. You ready for a deep cut, Mark?
Yeah, please.
This section, this executable stored in my memory, axiom of the dirt swallowed its makers whole.
Mm-hmm.
The delivery, did you have any inspiration there for the way that was?
I see your notes, and yes, that when we first were writing music, we were very into Last Chance to Reason. And Last Chance to Reason has a lot of those, like, you know, asynchronous, polyrhythmic, like vocoded chants over their music. And absolutely, I was channeling my early 2000s Michael Lassard there. 100%. If you called it. The use of the word executable, right? I tried not to get too techie, but I did in this moment because it felt good. It felt purpose. And you know, in this line, I use a word very intentionally, axiom, because I find axioms to be very, very fascinating, right? It's really interesting because, like, and again, I don't have any claims here. I'm not trying to call one side out, but these days, at least in much of the world that I am involved in, people are like, science, baby, yeah. And they're like, if it can't be measured or proven, it's dumb, and you believe in Sky Daddy and blah. And it's like, why is life, you know? And it's like, and I'm not saying that they're wrong for having those criticisms. I'm just so bored of them. You know, but at the same time, it's a good question, and it's not a gotcha. I don't mean it as a gotcha. It's like, why is life valuable? There is no objective reason. It's an axiomatic belief. Right? You cannot prove that life matters without it becoming an opinion. And I think that's awesome. I think that is so interesting. You know, one criticism you hear all the time is like, well, if you need a book to tell you not to kill people, then you're not a good person. It's like, well, we all need something, because there's actually no objective reason. You can't prove not to kill people like you can prove 2 + 2 = 4. So we all need something. If our measure for morality is not needing an underlining framework, then we're all bad. You know, whether you don't do it because a book tells you not to do it, or whether you don't do it because you believe that there is no objective morality, but that it's an expression of disgust. Okay, well, disgust is still arbitrary, right? Now, obviously, there are some people who, like, you hear on like older, back when I was into like the debates and stuff, they'd be like, if it wasn't for this book, I would love to go and kill people. It's like, okay, that's a very specific different thing. Like, yeah, that person is a bad person, because they're literally say, but for the general person, like, having a reference point for their morality, it's not a good counter argument. Because we all have one, and it's all arbitrary. And so, you know, I find axioms to be very interesting because they circumvent a lot of what we value as a very logic focused group that runs on emotion. And so this axiom of the dirt, right? Humans, again, mythology created from the dirt, life breath, swallowed its makers whole. It's like the axiom was flawed. The fundamental belief that they had the right to blast their progeny and their legacy across the universe and just claim a planet ultimately destroyed them. That's the only hint at what happened to the humans, and I'm not even sure that the humans are dead yet. Maybe they just moved to another station. I don't know. But yeah, that the word axioms and intersubjective structures I find fascinating, and as much as I have read about them and thought about them, I have no answers on any of it. Zero.
Zero, but you got a lot of thoughts and good examples.
I got a lot of thoughts. I got a lot of things to say. Yeah, that's true. But anyways, yeah, I'll let you keep going.
Yeah, let's scooch a little bit here. So at the end of this song, finally we get back into dialogue between these two characters, but the delivery has taken an intentional change, and that is that Kent is now voiced by you, and Atlas is now being voiced by Erin Dawson of Genital Shame. Can you tell me a little bit about working with her, finding her, and how she did?
So I'll make it concise, which like this song I'm very passionate about. So as you know, it's going to be very hard for me. But I was on a late night YouTube music deep dive, and I saw a song suggested on the side. I Met Carrie Colby. I don't know who Carrie Colby is. I still don't really know who Carrie Colby is. But I saw the artwork, and there's this like, it's like this deep shade of red. It's this deep shade of red, and there's just this woman looking like both very like beautiful, but also very like intimidating, like very shadowed. So it's like this like beauty, but also intimidating thing. And it looked like black metal, but it had a not black metal name. So I'm like, your boy's clicking that. Right. And then I listened to it, and I was like, this song is phenomenal. This song is doing some of the craziest stuff in black metal I've ever heard in my life. So I dug into the band, bought a vinyl super quick, and I found this person. You know, she's making black metal, Erin Dawson. Genital Shame is the name of the project, and I was like, this is so creative. I want her to be a part of it. And so I reached out to her, and she was like, hey, Liminal Right was my running album for a while, and I was like, that's dope. And so, you know, we invited her to be, and she killed it. I love the tone of her screams. I love the way she did everything. And this section is another mythological influence section. So there's a story in Norse mythology. And I think I'm getting a couple stories combined, because it's been like 6 or 7 years since I was reading Norse mythology. But there's a story where Thor meets a giant Utgarda Loki or something. I think I'm saying it terribly, and I don't remember what goes on, but there's this, there are like these challenges for Thor, and he has to drink from this horn. Well, he can't do it, and he's like angry, but it turns out he's been cheating. The horn was connected to the ocean. And so, you know, and I'm probably getting the story wrong. If anybody knows the story better than me, please correct me in the comments. But that's another example of how mythology doesn't have to make sense. Like, he didn't notice the ocean was connected to the bottom. Like, come on. But if you read mythology and you're like, that doesn't make sense, mythologies might not be for you. You know what I mean? That might not be your flavor. You walked in the wrong store, and that's okay. But don't criticize the store just because you don't like it. And so what's happening here is Sky Brother is asking Atlas to create impossibilities. So speak elision loud as truth. Elision is a linguistic term or pattern for the removal of sounds naturally as we speak, or even the removal of words, right? Elision, the omission of a sound or syllable when speaking. You know, so a really good example of this might be the way that a lot of people, myself included, I don't say I like this better than that. I say I like this better than that, better than. The word then becomes and so elision is the removal, and so you can't speak elision loud as truth. It is impossible. And so you know, Atlas comes up with the word, okay, ejoteiroem, silence. But it's not, elision isn't really silence, right? So it's not accurate. Speak in only echoes new. An echo can only be a replication of something that's happened. You can't technically have a new sound. And so, zonerue, echo. Speak ellipsis words. Well, an ellipsis is purposeful removal of words. It's 3 dots because those words aren't important. So Sky Brother is saying, speak elision loud as truth. Speak in only echoes new. Speak ellipsis words. I'm waiting, finding, and seeking. Right? Like, here's all these commands. Do them. I'm waiting. Make me feel better. And Atlas tries Eshoteirem Zonegue, right? Zonegue. I gotta pronounce it right. And then it's too much because it's literally impossible. And this is another symbol of how we often impose impossibilities onto our children, basically, you know,
or onto others. They don't have to be children. They could just be someone who's not from your culture, doesn't understand your language, something like that.
Onto others, yeah, for sure. For me, I was very much thinking parental when I came to this, but you are absolutely right. It can be in a lot of different contexts. It could be students. You know, a good example of this is sometimes, again, my son is 2.5, and sometimes, you know, I'll have these conversations about his behavior, and then I'm like, Mark, he isn't psychologically able to think about it that way. And I'm getting frustrated because I'm like talking to him about this cause and effect, and then I have to pause and be like, Mark, you're kind of dumb, bro. Like, and he's staring at me with a blank face, and you know, I've explained why not to put his feet on the table, and then he does it again. He's not being a punk. I'm just stupid. I'm just being a dumb parent. You know, the only way to teach him at this age not to put his foot on the table is to grab his foot and move it and say no. You know, and then as he gets older, we can have those conversations. And then so basically, Atlas throws in the towel. And you know, Atlas says, you know, Atlas I am, burden I am, pole that I am, you know, name the things you speak. I don't even know what it means to need something yet. So must I craft the world you've lost before I figure out who I am?
Yes, that line.
Oh. Must I craft the world you've lost before I craft me? And I think that is how many of us feel. And I think have felt in the past. You know, I felt this very much, you know, and, you know, my relationship with my mother is very healed. I you know, my mom's in Ireland right now, and she's like sending me cute little pictures, and we're chatting back and forth. But, you know, I left the church. I left religion, and I left it, and I had like an angry phase, you know? And I felt very imposed. I was like, you know, why is this belief system the most important thing? What about like me? What about my interests? What about our history? You know? And eventually, like I said, it turned out fine. But that's when I felt it. I felt it when I was like, everything falls apart just because I don't go to a building once a week. The fuck? Yeah. You know, that's what I felt. You know, but I think a lot of us have felt that for different reasons. It's like, you know, dad wants me to be a lawyer like him, and I don't want to be a lawyer like him. And now our whole relationship falls apart because I'd rather be a chef, you know? So it's really kind of that, you know, it's really kind of that. Yeah. And I think that this song is where the album gets really like kind of emotional, kind of pulls at your heartstrings. Cause I feel like, assuming they can understand what lyrics are about, because I tend to have a hard time writing clearly. It's very hard for me to write clearly. And I tried to be better at that in this album, but I feel like this is something that everybody could relate to. We've all had pressure put on us that was not only unfair, but impossible. And that impossibility sometimes is internalized as guilt. Yeah. It's my fault. It's my fault. I can't believe the earth was created in 7 days. It's my fault. I don't want to be a lawyer, you know? And it's like, no, it's not ever your fault for those things. Anyway. Yeah. No, that's one of my favorite lines on the whole album, because it does speak to a breadth of people and their experiences. Again, kind of going back to the bearing of shadows and our inspiration behind that, this line sums up a thing that brings us all together in a moment to realize that this is not a unique experience just for me. Yeah. This is pretty universal. All things being said. And it's really where Sky Brother Kent fully loses Atlas. Like, this is when it's past the point of no return, really.
Yeah. And did you have anything else you wanted to add to that before? I mean, I went over my notes with you, and you told great stories and examples. Is there anything that you want to call out here that you're proud of, or you want to just bring light to?
No, I think that that's pretty good. There are plenty more things that I could talk about, but I hope that people watch this part 1 of our 2-part lore series for Alinea, and then dig into it and kind of pull what they think from the lyrics, because ultimately, you know, that's kind of the thing. So there's more stuff I could say, but I think that is enough for us to give them the idea of to give you listeners, viewers, an idea of what this song is about and where we are in the album for now.
Yeah, I think this is a good place to bookmark, and I'll just do a shout out to those of you who are watching or listening. If you have thoughts or opinions or interest in what we've talked about to this point, leave a comment for us. We'd love to look at them, review them, maybe even make another episode talking about them and going over some of the questions that we get. So thank you all for your time. Very much appreciate it. Mark, we'll see you in episode 2.
Bye.